easy. Insto deleted? What was that? Was that a boss? Was that the boss? Was that the I guess. It gave me completion. Dude, what the f is this fizz damage? Holy sh. This damage is insane. I'm like one-shotting metamorphs. All right, this is double boss, so yo, it might actually be a little bit spicy. Kidding. I'm just gonna delete him right away. Dude, I'm such a fuck. I fucked up my rotation. I was just sitting there blade blasting. That's so useless. Oh, dude, I didn't even have Ball Grace up. Yo, I didn't even have this up. I just ate that shit. I just ate that. Holy shit, the balls. Dude, I didn't even pop anything until the end. I just ate that. Yo, god damn. Welcome back. I'm Tripolar Bear, and this is a Blade Blast, Bladefall physical version full build guide. We will be using the community fork of Path of Building, so make sure you go down to the description and find the link for the community fork of POB. And while you're down there, go ahead and sub to my YouTube channel and follow my Twitch to get more awesome build guides like this. And if you have any questions at all, get them answered live in my YouTube or Twitch live stream chat. This build's two main abilities will be Bladefall and Blade Blast. Bladefall is used to put lingering blades onto the ground. We will explode these lingering blades with Blade Blast. Blade Blast is the main damage component of this 2-button combo. Blade Blast is awesome as an ability because of how many overlapping explosions we can create and how much damage we can pump out very quickly. These two skills make this the highest damage League starter I have ever played. I was standing and instantly phasing map bosses in front of me and conquerors throughout the entire game with very minimal upgrades. This is one of the best League starters I have ever played, and I very much recommend playing this for the next League. The 2-button playstyle feels best on Assassin with all of the cast speed you get from the Ascendancy and right side of the tree. The clear is fast and the damage is out the wazoo. You can get very tanky with Wind Dancer and Kintsugi, or be a true softcore Chad and equip a carcass and my included damage tree to pump and load all over the endgame content. My favorite part about playing this build is not having to worry about any boss mechanics, since I killed them so fast. Why physical over poison? Well, the physical variant gets much more single target damage than the poison variant for a League start scenario, and I believe that poison may be hit with a general nerf ban for the next League start. So for now, I recommend the physical variant of the build, and even if the poison doesn't, I think I would still recommend the physical version, because the clear is not bad. You can't compete against Plague Bearer and Obliteration Wands, but I think the trade-off in clear is very much worth it for the absolute destruction of endgame bosses on a budget, but ultimately, it's up to you to decide. This build is not for you if you hate 2-button clear and multiple button single target playstyles. On bosses, we will put lingering blades down, pop Vol Grace, Vol Righteous Fire, self curse with Assassin's Mark, and then do our Blade Blast, Bladefall combo. Another problem with this build is if you choose the damage tree or don't get enough life on your gear, when your dodge fails and you don't have Fortify up, you may die if you sit in front of bosses like me. Our Blade Blast will scale its damage off of lingering blades left on the ground with 40 max, with an average of about 6 of those overlapping in the later part of the build once we get enough area of effect. We scale off of flat gem levels from a level 21 Blade Blast gem and plus physical levels from a Cold Iron point, and if you go the expensive route, we can get another plus physical gem level on our shield. We also, as an assassin, scale off of critical strike chance and multiplier from our Ascendancy, our passive tree, jewels, and our rare gear. Blade Blast is a spell, so we can get any spell damage or any physical damage on our tree and rare gear. Since Blade Blast is a spell, we will also use Vol Righteous Fire, which is a temporary buff, giving us more spell damage. Lastly, we will use Assassin's Mark to scale our damage, adding base critical strike chance and multiplier to hits against the marked enemy. Our build's clear ability and single target ability are the same, but for Legions and Delirium, we will pop Vol Grace to give us a boost in defense against all of those pesky monsters. For single target, you will have to use Vol Righteous Fire, Vol Grace, Self-Curse Assassin's Mark, and then perform the 2-button combo. Our build's defenses come from Acrobatics and Phase Acro, giving us base attack and spell dodge. We will add to this dodge chance with a Quartz Flask and at Zeri Step, giving us extra attack and spell dodge. On top of all this dodge, we get even more from Elusive, which is a temporary buff that gives us attack and spell dodge alongside some movement speed. And on Assassin, we get attack and cast speed. Most importantly, we take no extra damage from critical strikes while elusive since we pick up Mistwalker. To give us even more effective dodge and evade, we will use Flesh and Stone to blind nearby enemies and take 11 reduced damage from attacks from enemies not nearby. We will also use Shield Charge, linked to Fortify for an additional 20% damage reduction. As an assassin, while we're elusive, we get an additional 8. And if there's 2 rare or unique monsters nearby, we get another 10 damage reduction on top. And if you want to step it up a little bit more, at the cost of a little damage, you can swap the Carcass Jack for Kintsugi and your critical and spell damage shield for Mistwall for an additional 20% damage reduction from Kintsugi, and we get max attack block if we've not blocked recently from our Mistwall. I have also included a tree that gives more life and picks up Wind Dancer for another 20% damage reduction if we've not been hit recently. All of these layers of defense and very free damage should make for a stress-free and satisfying league start and build progression if you choose to invest heavily into this build. In normal lab, we'll pick up Mistwalker for our elusive buff on crit strike, 15 attack and cast speed while elusive, 8 damage reduction while elusive, increased effect of elusive, giving us extra dodge and move speed while also making the buff last longer, and the ever so powerful and busted, you take no extra damage from critical strikes while elusive, stopping many one-shots in higher tier maps. In Cruel Lab, we take opportunistic for the movement speed if you've killed recently, 25 more damage, while there is at most 1 rare or unique, which lets us bully campaign, map, and conqueror bosses much easier. And finally, 10 reduced damage taken, with at least 2 rare or unique monsters nearby. In Merciless Lab, we'll take Unstable Infusion for a chance to gain power charges on crit, a chance to gain power charge on non-crit, and +1 max power charges. And finally, in Uber Lab, we'll take Deadly Infusion, giving us 5 crit multi per power charge, 1.5 base critical strike chance at max power charges, and 10% move speed at max power charge. Our main damage endgame link setup will be put into our body armor, and the links will be Blade Blast, Intensify, Controlled Destruction, Energy Leech, Brutality, and increased crit strike damage for our 6th link. Some Awakened gems you might want to get will be Awakened Brutality, then Awakened Control Destruction, and then lastly, a level 4 Empower, replacing the critical strike damage. Our Bladefall setup will depend on if you have an Elder Influenced helmet that has Conk effect, or if you are using the Worm Sign gloves for the concentrated effect. Either way, put Bladefall in either of these items to have the lingering blades closer together for more overlaps. Now, in one of these two items, the link will be Bladefall, Unleash, Spell Cascade, and Faster Casting, giving us many blades and letting us put those blades down very fast, which gives us a smooth 2-button playstyle. Our defensive auras will be Flesh and Stone and the Vol portion of Vol Grace. Make sure you are not using Grace and only using the Vol portion of Vol Grace for the free attack and spell dodge. Our offensive auras will be War Banner for increased physical damage taken. And if you don't mind another button being pressed, you can put the banner down and get 100% increased damage. We will also use Pride, which is increased physical damage taken for nearby enemies based on how long we've been nearby them. The last offensive aura we will use is the Vol portion of Vol Righteous Fire. Just like Vol Grace, we will not use normal Righteous Fire, but only the Vol part of the gem, which sacrifices a small amount of life and ES to give us more spell damage buff. Vol RF accounts for nearly 25% of our total damage for bosses, so it is very important to save it for those bosses and use it very wisely, only for map bosses, or if it is a Conqueror map, for those Conquerors. The only curse we use on this build in the end game is going to be Assassin's Mark, which is extremely important for our single target damage. Make sure you self-cast the boss with this mark, or your single target may feel lacking. We will use Shield Charge, Faster Attacks, and Fortify for quick movement, and the Fortify buff giving us additional damage reduction. Alongside Shield Charge, we will also use Flame Dash to jump over the gaps and ledges that Shield Charge wouldn't otherwise be able to. We will link to it a low-level Arcane Surge, which gives us more spell damage and increased attack and cast speed when we spend enough mana with Flame Dash to trigger it. A low-level Arcane Surge lets us obtain this buff with every cast of Flame Dash instead of needing multiple casts to hit the mana cost threshold. We will get Frenzy and Endurance charges on kill from the Anointment Overcharged, which gives us 12 attack and cast speed, 12% more damage, and 12% physical damage reduction from our Frenzy and Endurance charges. If you are on the budget version, the Anointment Disciple of Unyielding will give us just the Endurance charges on kill, which is still very good, giving us 12 physical damage reduction. We will get the Onslaught buff in the budget version from an Onslaught on Kill Jewel, and on the expensive version from a Cinder Swallow Flask. We get phasing from a Quartz Flask on the budget version of the build, and from a phasing on Kill Abyss Jewel in the expensive version. Our bandit choice will be Alira, since we scale damage off of Critical Strike Multiplier, and the extra resistance on League Start is very helpful. For Pantheons, we will choose Soul of the Brine King to never get stun locked after a few unlucky dodge or evade rolls, and the Minor God Aberrath if you hate burning ground in your maps, or Tukahama for extra physical damage reduction if you love standing still on bosses and unloading on them. Let's talk about gearing our character now, starting with the League Start gearing, which is going to be most important for the upcoming League. We will be using the Wand recipe while leveling because it is very, very important to get this as soon as we can, because it gives us so much damage that it makes leveling much easier and much smoother. To get one of these wands, you need to vendor a magic scepter, wand, or rune dagger with a magic ruby, topaz, or sapphire ring, and 1 orb of alteration. At level 20, you can do the exact same recipe, but with a rare ring, and using essences to get a rare ring is very easy early on. Now, you can get a sapphire, ruby, or topaz ring by vendoring an iron ring with a blue gem for sapphire, green gem for topaz, and red gem for ruby. Next, you need to know about crafting resistances on the crafting bench. From the start of the game, you can take advantage of a very easy and powerful craft. In your hideout, for 1 transmutation, you can craft 16 to 20 resistance on each piece of gear that has a suffix open, and you can craft even on white items if you have to. Use this to easily cap resistances while leveling. I like to craft on rings like sapphire, ruby, topaz, or the 2-stone rings since they have resistance already, and on my crafted wands since the damage craft is a prefix. In every slot on your character, you need to find maximum life and resistances while crafting resistance everywhere you can. There are examples of this in the path of building. For the cheap elemental mapping version, we are going to use 2 wands with spell damage and increased critical strike chance for spells, a helmet with max life and resistance, a tabula rasa, the worm sign gloves because they give concentrated effect to socketed gems, and rampage if you anoint Discipline of the Unyielding, giving us endurance charge generation, and, since we're wearing these gloves, the rampage effect. Rampage is a kill counting buff that is very fun to play with and gives extra damage and movement speed the more kills that you have. Our boots will be 3-step assault since they give extra spell dodge while phasing and decent movement speed and life. Our amulet is an amber amulet since we need strength, and our amulet will have life and resistance on it. Both rings will be life and resistance and crafted res, and our belt will be strength base, life, and chaos resistance if you can find any. Our flask will be a seething divine life flask of heat to remove freeze and instantly heal us. Our complete mana sustain for the build is going to come from an enduring eternal mana flask of warding, which makes us continuously have our mana flask giving us mana even after our mana is full. And while this flask is going, we will be immune to curses, which is extremely important and mandatory for mapping. We will also have a diamond flask of staunching to remove bleeding and let us crit much more often, and a quartz flask of reflexes to give us additional attack and spell dodge, phasing, and increased evasion rating. Our last flask, if you can, is going to be an alchemist quicksilver flask of adrenaline. The important part of the quicksilver flask is to give us movement speed. So if you can't get the alchemist part, which increases the effect, it's okay. Just try to get the extra movement speed roll on your quicksilver so you can zoom through the maps. Let's talk about the physical budget version gear set next. This is when you will change your tree from the elemental version to the physical version tree, which we will talk about later. The physical budget version of this build is going to use the Cold Iron Point Dagger, which gives +3 level of all physical spell skill gems, which is very good for this build. As you remember, one of the best ways to scale our Blade Blast damage is adding levels to it. In our shield slot, we will use increased critical strike chance for spells, life, and resistances. Our helmet is going to be life and resistance as well, and we are still going to use a tabula rasa as a free 6-link in our body armor. We will still use the worm sign gloves for the conk effect and rampage, and 3-step assault for our boots for the extra spell dodge while phasing. On our amulet, we will use max life and resistance, making sure to anoint now Discipline of the Unyielding so that we get rampage from our gloves and extra physical damage reduction. Both rings are still going to be just life and resistance, as the ring slot is very easy to pick up a lot of resistances on. Our belt is going to be a strength-based belt that gives life and resistance as well, and all of the flasks will be exactly the same. The biggest change here in the physical version of the gear set is getting cold iron point and a good crit shield, preferably with crit strike chance for spells, or if you can just get a lot of spell damage, that is good as well. Next, for the medium budget of the physical build, we will still use cold iron point and our spell crit shield with life and res, our life and res helmet, but now we will use a carcass jack. Carcass jack is very, very good for this build because it gives us increased area of effect, which allows our blade blast to overlap much more, and it gives 50% increased area damage. This is the best body armor that we can get at this price range, and it really shows. You will have so many extra overlaps of your blade blast once you put this bad boy on. Our gloves are still worm side for the free conk and rampage, but our boots now are going to be at Zeri's step, giving us even more spell dodge, movement speed, life, and evasion rating than 3-step assault could. Our amulet now is going to be life, global critical strike multiplier, and resistances, now with the anointment overcharged, giving us a chance at all charges on kill, power, frenzy, or endurance charge. This is a great way to generate endurance charges and frenzy charges at the same time, giving us attack and cast speed, more damage, and physical damage reduction. Our rings are still going to be life and resistances, but now our belt is going to be a Stygian Vice, giving us a lot of life and extra strength and resistances. In the Stygian Vice, I want you to put an Abyss Jewel that has Onslaught on Kill on it. This is where we will obtain the Onslaught buff, which gives us 20 movement speed, attack speed, and cast speed. That is very, very good. I have included an extra variant on this physical budget version where instead of a spell crit shield with life and res, you will pick up the Mistwall unique shield, which gives us a lot of evasion rating, movement speed, extra fire and cold res, a chance to avoid elemental damage while phasing, and we have max block chance if we have not blocked recently, and if we have blocked recently, we have phasing. This is very, very good, as this guarantees we have 75 block chance as long as we've not blocked recently, which is very often. So it is an extra layer on top of everything else. If our evade fails us, if our dodge fails us, we have Mistwall, giving us another 75% chance to not get hit. Alongside this, we can also sub out the Carcass Jack body armor for a Kintsugi body armor. Kintsugi is very good because it gives us a 20% less damage taken if you have not been hit recently buff. This is nice because most of the time we should not be hit recently. So when we do get hit, it should be a big one, and we want to mitigate that as much as we can. So Kintsugi is very helpful to prevent one-shots. Every other piece is going to be the same. This is just an included set in case you want to sacrifice a little bit of clear and single target for a lot more survivability. Now, moving to the high budget version. On our shield, we are going to get a lot of spell damage and critical strike chance for spells. We also want to make sure that we're still getting life and chaos resistance anywhere we can. Now, in our helmet, we are going to get an Elder Influence helmet that has socketed gems are supported by level whatever concentrated effect. We want to get life on here if we can, and we want to get resistances if we can. If you need, you can do the multi-mod, can have up to 3 crafted modifiers, and craft 2 resistances that you need on there. We get a concentrated effect helmet now, so that we can replace our gloves and get a lot of life, a lot of resistance, and hopefully some chaos resistance as well. Our body armor and boots will remain the same, but now our amulet is going to be life, global critical strike multiplier, and we are going to try to get a hunter influence base that gives us physical damage leached as life. This is very, very important, as this is the only life leech source that we are going to pick up on this build. And since we do get life leech, now we can get the glorious vanity jewel that has a Huna in the name, bathed in the blood of, and the number does not matter. But what does matter is the sacrificed in the name of. We want a Huna, as this will give us Overleech. If you've ever played Slayer, the Overleech is the staple of a Slayer Ascendancy. This means, just like our Mana Flask, not ending once we hit full mana, our Life Leech will not end once we hit full life. So we will constantly have Life Leech ticking on us, as well as our Energy Shield, if our Energy Shield is not full. That is very, very good, and it's practically a Life Flask constantly ticking on us, which makes mapping much, much smoother. Now, on our rings for this high budget version, we are trying to get maximum life and a Shaper influence so that we can obtain life gained for each enemy hit by your spells, giving us instant life recovery every time our Bladefall and Blade Blast hit an enemy, which is very, very often. The resistances on these rings need to match whatever resistances you need. I have only put placeholder resistances on these rings. As an example, our belt is going to remain the same as a Stygian Vice, strength, life, and resistances, but now, as we are in the high budget version, we are going to drop the Onslaught Jewel and try to get a Corrupted Blood and Phasing on Kill Jewel. We get Phasing on Kill now because in our flask section, we have replaced the Quartz Flask with a Cinder Swallow Flask, which is silver, which we get Onslaught from. We want this flask because we can get a lot of critical strike chance, and we can get instant life, energy shield, and mana recovery every time we kill an enemy during this flask. Our next flask change is going to be dropping a diamond flask to obtain a bottled faith. This flask is insane. This gives us so much damage. In our Blade Blast setup, this is accounting for 33% of our total damage. This is such a boost in damage. On a sulfur base, it already gives 40% increased damage. It creates consecrated ground, and if an enemy's on consecrated ground, they have 100% increased critical strike chance against them. On top of this, the flask gives 2% crit strike chance base, and enemies on the consecrated ground created during this flask's effect, they take increased damage, which is such a more damage multiplier. It is wild. This flask is so good, and it is a mainstay on every high-end critical strike build because of how good it is and how much damage it adds. Now, on this version where you will have a glorious vanity, you can start to pick up some good rare jewels. I have an example of these in the path to building. Life and 2 of whatever you can get is going to be good enough. You want spell damage, global critical strike multi, or spell multiplier, and whatever else you can get is totally fine. You can also get just regular damage, area damage. There's tons of things you can get on these jewels. These are just an example of some of the things you can get. Now, I have included what I consider to be a god tier version of this build. This is not expected. It is just if you want to juice this build all the way to the sky as much as you can. These are examples of items you could start to work towards, as they are extremely, extremely expensive. In the wand slot, you want to find a ton of spell damage, increased crit strike chance for spells, global strike multiplier, and cast speed. On your shield, you want spell damage, crit strike chance for spells, max life, level of all physical spell skill gems, and if you can, a resistance that you need. On the helmet, we want to create an Elder Warlord helmet with concentrated effect, maximum power charges, and nearby enemies take 9% increased physical damage. This helmet would be way too expensive on its own, so if you want to Awakener Orb just 2 of these mods together, you can. I recommend getting the nearby enemies take increased physical damage before the max power charge if you can. On our body armor, you can get a double corrupted +2 socketed AoE +1 socketed gems carcass jack, or if you would like, you can also get an explode and spell crit life chest. You awaken orb, the enemies you kill explode, and the +2 spell critical strike chance together. This is a Hunter and Crusader base chest piece. Our gloves are going to be a lot of life and resistances. Our boots will be life, movement speed, and tailwind if you've dealt a critical strike recently, and an attack and cast speed enchant, which gives us a lot more speed. Tailwind is just 10% more speed in general. Everything related to speed is increased by Tailwind. Our amulet is going to be a lot of max life, global crit multi, physical damage leached as life, and +1 level of all dexterity skill gems. The life rings are going to be exactly the same. We are looking for a lot of life and the Shaper influenced mod, life gain for each enemy hit by your spells. The belt is going to be a Hunter influenced belt with a lot of strength, a lot of flat maximum life, % increased maximum life, and whatever else you can get on this belt. In the Abyssal socket, you want global critical strike multiplier, maximum life, and chance to gain phasing on kill with a corrupted blood corruption on here for corrupted blood immunity. In the expensive and god tier versions, I recommend picking up a Watcher's Eye with the mod chance to deal double damage while using Pride. The double damage chance equates directly to a more multiplier. So if you get a 10% chance, you're dealing now 10% more damage than you used to be. Also, for our cluster jewels, we will be using in the expensive and god tier version a large physical cluster with, first and foremost, the mod Force Multiplier, which gives a 5% chance to deal double damage and 25 increased physical damage. Then you want Iron Breaker, which gives us 10 overwhelm physical damage reduction and physical damage. And last, Battle Hardened, which gives evasion rating and armor and 35 increased physical damage. In every one of these jewel sockets, you want to pick up maximum life, crit strike multiplier for spells, global crit strike multiplier, and spell damage while holding a shield. Now that we've talked about the entire gear, let's talk about our skill tree. In this path of building, there will be multiple trees for leveling, just like there are multiple gear sets. The elemental tree we will use as we level the elemental version of Blade Blast until we get that dagger called Cold Iron Point. Leveling as elemental lets us take advantage of the flat damage wand recipe and is in general much better. Once you level through the axe and get close to finishing the elemental tree or close to buying your Cold Iron Point, you need to save 25 respec points or 25 regrets. We'll use these regrets to respec our tree to the physical version by removing any and all elemental nodes and instead getting the critical strike, spell damage, and physical damage nodes on the tree. We will level this build using Storm Blast mines linked to swift assembly and added lightning damage when you find a 3-link. This is a great early leveling ability and synergizes with Orb of Storms, which we will pick up at level 4. Put the Orb of Storms down and use Stormblast Mine inside to make the orb chain lightning to anything nearby. You can also use Frost Bomb linked to Onslaught if you don't mind the extra button presses, as this is a great damaging ability and Onslaught generator early on. Now, at level 4, grab Frost Blink, but change this to Flame Dash when you can. You can also use Smoke Mine and Flame Dash together if you don't mind the extra buttons. Putting Detonate Mine on left mouse button helps a lot. As Smoke Mine is very good to use in this combo, it makes it very fast to traverse long distances, and Smoke Mine gives us a movement speed buff for about 4 seconds after we've used Smoke Mine. Make sure you link Arcane Surge to Flame Dash and keep it at a low level so we have Arcane Surge up all of the time. In Act 2, pick up Skitterbots and Herald of Ice. In Act 2 and 3, make sure you are picking up all magic and rare items that you can. Identify them and vendor them for alterations so you can buy all the gems you need at level 28, which is when we will swap to Blade Blast and Blade Fall as our main damage setup. At 28, you want to make sure you can get Blade Fall, Spell Cascade, and Faster Casting all linked together. At 38, you want to grab Unleash and link that with this setup as well. For your Blade Blast setup, you want to have Blade Blast, Physical to Lightning, Controlled Destruction, and Elemental Focus. Now, for our auras, we will use Herald of Thunder and Herald of Ash. If you need, you can drop Summon Skitterbots if you need more mana. Our curse setup is going to be Conductivity, Wave of Conviction, and Hex Touch. If you can't get the Wave of Conviction and Hex Touch, don't worry, just self-cast the Conductivity Curse. We will use this setup and the previous movement skill setup all the way up until mapping. Now, for the mapping gem setup, we are going to use Blade Blast, Controlled Destruction, Physical to Lightning, Elemental Focus still, but now we are going to add Intensify in a 5-link and Increased Critical Damage in our 6-link if you do get one or a Tabula. If you grabbed the Worm Sign Gloves or an Elder Helmet, put this Bladefall setup in there. You want Bladefall, Unleash, Faster Casting, and Spell Cascade. This will create a lot of lingering blades on the ground, getting us to that 40 blade cap. For the auras, you want to use Herald of Ash, Herald of Thunder, and it shouldn't be a mana problem now to use Summon Skitterbots, as you should have an Enduring Mana Flask. We will also self-cast Assassin's Mark, giving us a lot of critical strike chance and multiplier. For our movement, we will use Shield Charge, Faster Attacks, and Fortify, as well as Flame Dash and Arcane Surge at a low level, so that we also get our Arcane Surge buff. We will have a Cast When Damage Taken setup, where we will use Cast When Damage Taken, Immortal Call, Increased Duration, and all of this linked to a Vol Grace. Only using the Vol Grace for bosses and not the Grace Aura, just the Vol version. We will do the same with Vol Righteous Fire, as these two Vol buffs are very, very important to have up for bosses, giving us a lot of dodge from Vol Grace and a lot of damage from Vol Righteous Fire. Keep in mind, do not use the normal versions of these two abilities. We will not use Grace, and we will not use Righteous Fire, just the Vol versions. Now, once you get a Cold Iron Point Dagger, you can transition your tree and your gems to the physical version. To start off, you want to use Blade Blast, Intensify, Controlled Destruction, Energy Leech, Brutality, and Increased Critical Strike Damage, now that we are a physical version. In the expensive version, you can upgrade Brutality to Awaken and Controlled Destruction to Awaken for both, as well as picking up an Empower level 4 instead of the crit strike damage. Our Bladefall setup will remain exactly the same. Put it in your gloves if you're using Worm Sign, or your helmet If you're using an Elder Helmet that has concentrated effect, we want to use still Bladefall, Unleash, Spell Cascade, and Faster Casting. Now though, for our auras, we will use War Banner to make nearby enemies take increased physical damage, and Flesh and Stone, so nearby enemies are blinded, making them much harder to hit us, and we take 11 less damage from attacks that aren't nearby. We will also use Assassin's Mark as our self-cast curse, as it's still the best mark and curse that we can use. Our other aura will be Pride, making enemies take increased physical damage the more we stay near them. We will still use the Shield Charge, Fortify, Faster Attack setup because we want Fortify, and we will now swap to a Cast when damage taken Steel Skin setup so that we can get a bubble of damage instead of just reduced damage taken. We will link that just like before to Increased Duration and Vol Grace so that the Steel Skin and Vol Grace last as long as possible. We will still use Flame Dash with a low level Arcane Surge and the Righteous Fire buff to give us a lot of spell damage. Now for our tree. For the first 12 levels, we are going to come out of the Shadow getting elemental damage, life, the elemental focus node, and even more damage. From 12 to 33, we are going to get the life and the damage and area of effect node. We are going to get Fangs of the Viper giving us physical damage and move speed, and we will move on to the acrobatics and phase acro wheel, making sure to do normal lab as soon as you can after Act 3. On the way to level 55, we will go up towards Witch and get the hybrid maximum life and energy shield wheel. We will get Crackling Speed, which gives us extra lightning damage and cast speed since we will be leveling as an elemental build. Arcane Expanse giving spell damage and area of effect. And we will move on to the Witch Heart and Soul giving max life and mana, and the Blast Radius giving area of effect and damage, making sure to do Cruel Lab at level 55. From 55 to 70, we are going to get the Critical Strike Chance and Multiplier. From the Witch, we'll move up and grab Cruel Preparation, giving life and all res. We'll go over to Templar to get life and mana regeneration, as well as some damage and life from Discipline and Training. We will also now get the Nimbleness wheel that gives cast speed and critical strike chance for spells, as that is very good and makes our gameplay much smoother. For the rest of the elemental tree, until we respec for the physical version, we will be getting the rest of the critical strike multiplier nearby. We will get extra life that is nearby our tree, and we will move over to the left side of the Templar because it'll give us extra spell damage and spell crit, physical damage, more life, and it will give us the Divine Judgment wheel, as this is so much elemental damage. On top of this, we will also get the Divine Wrath and Divine Fury, which gives us elemental damage and fizz damage, as well as gaining fizz as extra of fire and lightning. Now, once you get a Cold Iron point, we will respec to the physical budget life version or the physical budget damage version. Either of these are very good, but the life version will help you survive a lot better if you really don't like dying. If you don't mind dying but having extra clear and single target, the damage version is very good, and it gets a couple jewel sockets that let you get extra life and global crit multi. The budget life version though will remove all of the nodes by the Templar, and it will instead Wind Dancer down by the bottom of the Ranger tree, and a couple life and crit strike nodes on the way there as well. This tree focuses on getting as much life as possible so that you don't die as much, and Wind Dancer helping you take less damage as well. You should still have a lot of damage even if you choose this life version, so it could be a great compromise between the two. The damage version though focuses on getting all of the physical damage nodes that it can. It will also grab the spell crit and spell multiplier nodes that are nearby the assassin side, but giving up a little bit of life for more damage could be up your alley. The next version of the tree is going to be the physical version for a higher budget because it will include a glorious vanity setup. Remember, in the name of Ahuna is the important part. We will still get a lot of life on the tree. We will still pick up Wind Dancer, but this is for a much higher level character, although you can remove some of the life nodes and make it a little bit lower if you need. The last tree that I have included in this path of building is the physical expensive AF tree. This is going to have the glorious vanity setup, very, very good rare jewels, but it will drop Wind Dancer and instead pick up a very good large physical cluster, giving us extra jewel sockets and a lot more damage. Lastly, let's talk about some frequently encountered problems you might have with this build. If you're having problems with mana sustain, you need to grab an Enduring Eternal Mana Flask. This will solve all of your mana problems. If it doesn't make sense based on the words on the flask, just trust me and buy one or roll one and use it, and you'll understand what it does then. If you're having problems sustaining your life, I would recommend trying to pick up the physical leech and getting the life budget version of the tree up so that you have more life and you get some life leech. If you're getting a lot of random one-shots, make sure your flasks are up all of the time, and if you need, you can go to the budget life and Wind Dancer version and also pick up a Kintsugi and a Mistwall shield, which will give you a ton of damage reduction and a lot of chance to block whatever incoming damage is coming through. Also, in Legions and Delirium, I will use my Vol Grace a lot so that I can dodge whatever spear throwing or shenanigans happen in the Delirium Legion combo, as those get very rippy very fast in higher tiers. If you feel you don't have enough damage, you need to make sure your gems are all level 20 and 20 quality, and your Blade Blast needs to be level 21 in a 6-link. On top of this, you need to make sure you are using Vol Righteous Fire, self-casting the Assassin's Mark Curse, and if you need a little bit more juice, you can put down the War Banner on the boss as well, giving 100% increased damage and 20 attack and cast speed, as well as 10 additional physical damage reduction. And if you feel you don't have enough life, even if you're on the budget life and Wind Dancer version, then you need to look at your gear pieces and make sure you're getting as much life as you can on each and every one of these. Each piece should ideally have 70 or more life, with some pieces later on able to get 100 or more with a little bit more money. This build should have no problems hitting 5k life, and with a high investment 6k or more, depending on which tree you're using. Thanks for watching, everyone. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube and follow my Twitch to get more detailed POBs and video guides for the very best builds each league. All right, you don't want to miss out. See you guys later. Bye.